competition. That's what we are going to be analyzing now. It's another way of understanding how to use the competitive advantage of a company, and this is to some extent the essence of strategy. Remember, competitive advantage, what makes a company better than competitors at satisfying the desires, the needs of customers. So we have to start really going deep into competition and understanding how to compete. This, again, part of the story of using advantage, you scale, you compete, then you get into vertical integration, diversification, internationalization. So now let's get into the traditional ways of analyzing competition. I'm going to provide an overview of some of the ideas you have seen elsewhere, especially in your microeconomics introduction to introductory course. And then from there, I get into dynamics, two different approaches. One, which is incumbent strategies. If you are a company already established and all of a sudden you have new entrants that happen to be bigger or perceived to be bigger, better, more sophisticated technology, what are your options? And the alternative, which is if you're a new entrant, you're trying to get into an established place in which you have established competitors, how do you enter? So these are two different approaches we get into dynamics. But before that, a brief review of competition in general. Traditional models of competition, 4 different ones coming from the industrial organization theory. Perfect competition, to some extent, is the model that we should aspire in. We are thinking about welfare benefits and customers getting the best price and the best quality. However, if you think about it as a manager, perfect competition is not good. Why? Because you are not going to be able to make profits. Yes, you may cover your costs, but that's about it. It's a bad news when you're getting into perfect competition if you're running a company. What are the conditions? Many buyers and many sellers, which means that nobody really has an influence over prices and quantities. They tend to be relatively small, and they are selling products that are undifferentiated. So you are thinking about price. You are not thinking about this suits my lifestyle better, or it happens to be better quality. There is perfect information. So as soon as somebody drops the price, everybody knows about it, and customers will just flock to that particular provider. And then there is no transaction costs. Issues of distance, issues of contracting don't really exist here. This is a model. There aren't really any products that match this particular model, but nevertheless, it's a good starting point for thinking about, okay, what are the differences? How do we operate in these conditions? In perfect competition, it's a matter of best price. And it's a story of trying to make sure that you are keeping ahead of everybody else by getting better information. But again, because it is perfect information, you're not going to get the better information. It's just the market determines everything. Imperfect competition is a reality for most industries, and it's a reality for most companies. There is a degree of differentiation among products. It can be real. Some products are higher quality than others. They have more features. They are done with better care. They last longer, or it might be perceived. Customers, in some cases, consumers think that, look, actually, it looks better, even if not in terms of quality better, but just because it has a particular logo, the brand has created the image that if it is from this particular brand, the product is probably better. And you also have issues of geographic differentiation, in which it might be more convenient to go to one place or another. If you think about simple example of gasoline, for the most part, as consumers, we don't really know the difference between gasoline produced in one refinery and another. Many cases, we just go for convenience. This happens to be the gas station that is close by when I was driving. Yes, if we are thinking that the prices are okay, we are just going to go to that particular one. Or it might be that, yes, why do you go to this restaurant when there is a better one further than? Well, it is convenient. All I have to do is walk rather than take the car. So there is a story of imperfect competition, and that's a reality for most companies. Now we move into the other model, which is oligopoly. Now it's not only an issue that the products are not the same, that there is some differentiation, but on top of that, there are few competitors, which means that you can end up in a situation with lots of competition or very little competition. There might be a lot of competition because companies are trying to basically push each other, and as soon as somebody does something, the competitor is going to react because they are going to see that, look, if we don't react to them, we're going to lose a part of the market. Or that might be very little competition because they accommodate each other. So let's have a nice life. Why get into tough competition? There is some differentiation in our products, so let's not compete too harshly. It is illegal to coordinate this level of no competition, but in some cases you end up with this accommodation. Why do we have oligopolies? There is some degree of barriers to entry. It might be capital intensive, it might be technology intensive, there might be some regulation that limit the number of competitors, and you end up with a few companies dominating the market. The final one is the monopoly, in which you only have one company. This monopsony is the case of not the producer, but the buyer happens to be only one company. And this can be because there are some legal sources of that monopoly. The government allows only one company to operate in the industry. This used to be the case for many of the utilities and the infrastructure. In many cases, those were also state-owned. The government will just give the license to one company, which was state-owned, and that was the only provider. Or in some cases, there is a story of natural monopolies when it is more efficient to have only one company instead of lots of companies because of issues of investments in infrastructure, for example. It might be more efficient to only have one telephone company, one electricity company laying cable and providing connections to houses instead of having 2 or 3 companies trying to provide those connections. So these are the different types of traditional competition models. These are static, we analyze it, and it's a first step for understanding competition. How do we use advantage here? It's going to be different when you are in perfect competition, that you have to be literally reacting to what others are doing and you don't have any control over what is happening. In perfect competition, you can invest to try to increase the differentiation of your product versus others. In oligopoly, there is a story of how much you are going to react to others. In monopoly, there is an analysis of how do you make sure that you continue being the monopolist and to what extent you use that monopolistic position to increase your profitability. And then we go into the dynamics, and this is where game theory is coming into play. And this is a story of, yes, we have this industry structure. So how do we interact with each other? Are we going to cooperate or not cooperate with our competitors? Are we going to get into an issue of zero-sum game, which is wherever I gain is going to be gained at the expense of somebody else? Or no, the market is growing, and yes, we are growing, and so they are, so we can accommodate each other. We don't have to compete very harshly. If the market is not growing, maybe we get really into a lot of competitive behavior. Are we going to get into actions that are simultaneous? So I'm reducing prices at the same time as the other, or do I wait for others to see how they react for my next move? And here is what you have seen in economics, the traditional prisoner's dilemma, in which you have 2 different individuals, and if they cooperate, they get a benefit. If they don't cooperate, they get a lower benefit. And if there is a difference in behavior, one benefits a lot, the other doesn't. So that gets into the story. It's a really nice way of understanding game theory. It's the basics of that. Tit for tat is another way of understanding game theory, in which you are going to react, and you are going to react in a way that basically matches what the other person is doing, so that if the prices you drop, if you stop dropping prices, you stop. There is some level of accommodation without having to talk to each other and coordinate. Then the story to think about, do I respond to any actions that competitors take, or do I just accommodate? And this depends on my ability to respond, and my responses, are they going to be harsh? And yes, price competition, of course we go, or is it just going to be, well, let's make it softer so that we signal that we don't want to really get into competition, and that way we can to some extent accommodate and have a better life, which the better life at the end of the day is going to be little competition. If you're thinking as a manager, competition is great, but competition is great for others, not when you face the competition, because competition is going in many cases to push your ability to achieve high profits down. And then other things to think about if you want dynamics, are you going to be the first mover? Are you going to be the first entrant, or are you going to just wait for others to start? Are you going to get into issues of competition? And here it is the idea of cooperating with your competitors. And this happens, for example, when you're trying to get standards. In some cases, there are R&D alliances, and you are working with your competitor at the same time that the product market, you are trying to do better than they are. You might be a supplier of your competitor because you happen to produce, for example, screens or batteries for phones, and you end up competing with producers or makers of phones, smartphones, in the marketplace for the consumers. This is a story that it's interesting to think about, and the interesting part is thinking about the dynamics. And here let's analyze two different ones. One of them is incumbent strategies. And this is a reading that is based mostly on if you are an emerging market company, how do you react to companies that are coming from advanced economies? We tend to think that, well, much better technology, much better brand, and they are coming from countries with a relatively low cost of capital, and they are established globally. How can we, a small company in an emerging economy, compete against them? You feel like, look, there isn't really much we can do. This is kind of sumo. It's a much bigger competitor. Off we go, we're going to lose. Traditional reactions in this case are you ask for government protection, you become the subordinate partner. Okay, you come here, I'm going to be your alliance partner. I'm going to provide you with access to the market, understanding of the customers, maybe local brands, production, maybe local production facilities. You provide me with better technology, more capital, and off we go, and they will do better in this country. In some cases, you just sell, look, it was good until now, but we are going to be unable to compete, so why don't we just sell our company to the coming foreign company. This reflects a traditional view of traditional framework developed by Hirschman in 1970 in a book. There is exit voice loyalty, very good framework for understanding challenges. Whenever you have a challenge, what are the options? Well, you can exit and avoid it and sell in this particular case, or you can try to be loyal and you adapt, and then you just modify your operations to whatever is the new condition, or you express voice, you disagree, and you push back. This has later been applied in financial markets as an explanation of investors. The stock market is coming down, the price of the company is not, price of the company is not doing very well. What do? I can either just sell and basically avoid future losses, or just wait and see, the loyalty story, or I can become an active investor and go and look, tell management you have to do something about it. Why don't you just fix these things? Exit voice loyalty, very good framework for analyzing challenges. This is a traditional view. There is an alternative, and the story here is that yes, that's good, but it assumes that companies, foreign companies, bigger companies are not going to face challenges. Remember, they are new entrants, and they are not going to be always transfer their advantages across borders. They don't, in some cases, they don't know them. They don't have the production facilities. We are good as incumbent companies. We have to think that we know the market better. We have been here for a long time. Maybe our technology is not as sophisticated, but it is well adapted to the local conditions. Maybe our brand is not a global brand, but it is cherished by consumers here. why don't we just think about maybe we have an option to compete? And the way to think about it is two different dimensions. The industry, are there pressures to globalize, which means that there are advantages for operating across borders, being a global company, or no, actually each market is very different because of regulation, because of transportation, because of consumer differences, because competitor differences. So no, there isn't really an advantage for being operating globally. And how easy is it to transfer your competitive assets, your sources of advantage, your resources and capability? Can you transfer them quickly, easily across borders, or is it really difficult? With these two dimensions, we end up with 4 different options. One is in case that you have an industry in which there are advantages of being a global operator, and there are lots of pressures for globalization, and resources are customized to a home market, and the story is, well, you can become a dodger, you become the local link in the value chain, you sell out, and these are the traditional stories that, well, I'm not going to be able to compete, so let me just go into a niche and then, or just sell, and well, it was good until it lasted. Well, but maybe there is an ability for you to transfer your resources to other places, so why don't you become a contender? So in some cases, emerging market companies or companies in general are very good, but managers didn't realize that there are opportunities to take the company abroad and increase in scale, and off you go, and you become another multinational. You upgrade your capabilities, and you compete against those established multinationals, starting with niche markets in which you can dominate, and then you can expand to others. Alternatively, when there are pressures for globalization that are relatively low, well, you can defend your and resources are customized to the market, you defend your territory. Doesn't really matter that they are multinationals and they operate in lots of places. They are going to be new entrants. Nothing there isn't really a benefit for being in an industry, in a global company. I control the market, I defend, I kick out the foreign companies. Or finally, when there are low pressures for globalize, but you can transfer resources across borders, well, maybe you can become a multinational, but not quite operating globally. You become an extender, and then you go to countries that are similar to your home country. This is some recommendations for companies in terms of, as an incumbent, what do you do when you face bigger and supposedly better companies? An alternative discussion is the story of new entrant strategy. So now you are the one that is coming in. How do you reconsider the positions of incumbents? Is there something that you can do, assuming that you can get around the barriers to entry? So with this, this is good strategy, and there are 3 principles, 3 recommendations on this. Principle number 1, repeat movement. You enter the new market and try to find areas in which incumbents are not well established or not established at all. Try to avoid the direct competition, and it's a story of a blue ocean strategy in which, yes, there's going to be a lot of competition here. Is there a way for me to find an area in which I can just move in and move around very quickly, invest quickly, and then to some extent stay there? Yes, now you are in, avoid competition. If all of a sudden you decide, oh, there is a new segment, that was a segment we were not considering, can we move into another segment in which we are not quite competing? Don't try to compete against established competitors. Be flexible in your investment. And then finally, think about what is it that limits their ability to counteract to you. In some cases, it might be have lots of investments and they decided to go premium and they are operating very well there, and that's their market. But if I go into the low end, there is very little incentive for them to do that. Why? Because if they drop prices, it's going to be undermining the premium branding positioning. So maybe that's the area in which I can operate. Yes, they might drop prices once in a while so that they try to threaten my position, but I understand that the investment is in that particular area. So yes, I can continue operating here and then thinking about limitations that they have to counter in my ability to compete. thinking about this is one way to understand. As a new entrant, is there a way for me to operate here? It's a story of finding niches and being flexible and trying to avoid competition, not getting into direct competition with others, and trying to think that, yes, now I enter, now you're new. I'm the incumbent. Is there somebody else who can come as a new entrant and basically replicate the same type of strategy? So with this, these are the lessons in terms of thinking about competition. Source of competitive advantage, you use them. Competition is the other big important decision that you have to make. The traditional models that you have seen in economics, perfect competition, imperfect competition, or oligopoly, monopoly, all of them are good. That's the first step you have to do to understand what is happening in the industry, which are the competitors, what is the structure of that particular industry. Those are static. The next thing is think about competitive dynamics, whether there is competition, cooperation, the level of cooperation, which are going to be your actions. And here you have two different options, as an incumbent and as a new entrant. If you are the incumbent, all of a sudden bigger, better competitors, or supposed to be better competitors, come in. It's not an issue that you have to sell. You can always, depending on the characteristics of the industry or the resources and how easy they are to transfer, you can find other strategies. The dodger, defender, extender, contender. These are 4 options depending on those 2 different dimensions. Alternatively, if you are the new entrant, well, they are already established competitors. What do? Think about their ability to react to you. Can you find a niche? Can you be more flexible? And can you find ways in which they are not going to be able to react to your entry? So that's it for the analysis of competition. I hope that this was useful, and I will see you in a couple of days. Bye-bye.